Hardy perennials are some of the most valuable plants we can grow in our gardens because not only do they provide the colour and interest, the structure and form, whether it's in patio pots or borders through the summer months and many of them throughout the year too, but they come back every year. So they're tremendous value for money. So in this video, I'm going to introduce you to a range of those. Some I grow in my garden, some I've seen while I'm out and about visiting other people's gardens. All hardy, all perennials which will come back year after year. And I think you're going to love my selection. I've managed to find over a dozen plants, many of them at their very best through the summer months, providing week after week, month after month of colour, interest, structure and form. So let's kick straight off with my first plant. For a long season of blooms right through summer and into autumn, the pincushion flower is a lovely low-growing perennial forming neat mounds of ferny grey-green leaves crowned by these glorious flower heads with flowers held on wiry stems reaching perhaps 12 to 18 inches or so in height. Being compact, it's ideal for planting towards the front of a flower border. This hungry tortoiseshell butterfly adores feeding from the flowers of Scabious pink mist, a reasonably compact variety that produces a succession of soft pink flowers up to 2 inches across from around June through to September. With their wide insect appeal, you can see why a popular blue-flowered variety was named butterfly blue, can't you? And there are several other named varieties in different shades and colours available too, so search around your local garden centre and hopefully you'll find one to suit your colour schemes. Butterfly blue usually starts flowering a little later than pink mist, continuing well into September, but often nurseries force their plants into early bloom. So you can find plants in garden centres in full flower as early as April and May, even though your established plants in your garden won't usually start flowering probably until early summer. These Scabious prefer a sunny site and a well-drained soil, and they'll even grow really well in patio pots too, producing a long succession of flowers that the bees, butterflies and other pollinators enjoy feeding from too. It's reasonably drought tolerant once it's established, so it grows well in rock gardens and cottage gardens, and it looks lovely in prairie garden settings mixed in with ornamental grasses. Promptly deadhead to remove faded blooms and encourage more stems to grow up and carry even more flowers month after month. Now just look really closely at an individual flower and all those protruding stamens across the centre of each bloom, and you can see just how these charming hardy perennials got their common name of pincushion flower. Aren't they gorgeous? I've always been impressed by the flowers of this striking hardy perennial called Phlomis russelliana. With its upright habit and strong architectural form, it's a plant that really makes a statement. When those flower spikes of the Turkish sage, as is commonly known, first start elongating upwards through May, I often stand and wonder just how tall they'll get, and how many whorls of hooded flowers each stem will produce, spaced out at intervals, each supported by a pair of outstretched leaves. Will it be 3, 4 or 5, or perhaps even more? I spotted this Phlomis russelliana growing at Cambridge Botanic Garden in a lovely planting combination with Nepeta, the catmint, where its green spikes push up through the lower clouds of blue flowers, complementary in colour and contrasting in form and texture. This is a hardy perennial that doesn't need to be dead-headed. So keep your hands off and your pruners away once those yellow flowers fade, and let the old flower spikes age and turn silvery through late summer and into autumn. I returned to Cambridge Botanic Garden in late October, and those same flower spikes still looked striking. Upright, architectural, perhaps skeletal, but catching the autumn sunlight and I imagine on misty mornings they would be linked by cobwebs glistening in dew. Phlomis likes a sunny position, but it will tolerate some dappled shade, and it likes a soil that does hold enough moisture to sustain its growth through summer, but which doesn't sit cold and wet through winter. In my own garden, I've planted Phlomis to fill a gap that I hope it will grow up and into over time, filling out even more every summer. My newly planted Phlomis only produced a crown of foliage in its first year, but now in its second, I'm enjoying a couple of flower spikes, hopefully being joined by many more as this clump expands and matures over the coming years. This variety of Anthemis, it's a simple daisy-like flower. It's a variety of Anthemis tinctoria and it's called E.C.Buxton. It's got a simple daisy-like flower, pale yellow petals with a beautiful golden centre. The renowned plantswoman Beth Chatto called this a jewel of a plant, and E.C. Buxton was one of her very favourite hardy perennials. Each bloom also lasts a long time, making this a really good cut flower. So if you fancy a nice big vase, perhaps just taking individual flowers or some stems of blooms and bringing this indoors, and you can enjoy these lovely pale yellow daisy heads for a long season of colour. Towards the end of the year, once the flowering's finished, I'll cut this down quite low. I won't cut it down to the ground because you'll hopefully have some leafy growths surviving the winter, the shoots down at the base. But I cut it back quite hard, remove all of the old growth from the top, and being a hardy perennial, it will come back and put on an even bigger display of blooms next year. Campanula Kent Belle has been one of my firm favourite bell flowers for many years, taking pride of place, planted on the corner of my main flower border, right next to my garden bench, where I can sit through June and July watching the bees enter each large, deep violet blue flower in turn, searching for food. Kent Belle has lovely large flowers, fairly narrow and about 2 inches long, but each with a characteristic bell shape that their common name describes. These are a strong colour and have a lovely sheen that catches the sunlight, with the opening at the base of each flower displaying a slightly reflexed, pointed zigzag edge. This hardy perennial variety is really reliable in my garden, dying down to soil level each winter, but returning in spring with upright stems clad in heart-shaped green leaves surging up through March and April. As we move through to the end of May, these upright stems have already reached perhaps 2 to 3 foot in height, maybe a little bit taller in some gardens. They are reasonably strong and upright, but they can grow heavy and start falling over, especially when the flowers develop in the tips of the shoots. In a sunny position, they should stay a bit shorter. In a shaded spot or dappled shade spot, they can grow a bit taller. And if the weather during spring has been very wet, growth can be luscious and soft. These stems can grow taller, and as soon as the flowers start developing, they'll flop over. If you've got it growing amongst some other herbaceous perennials, they can give it a little bit of support, like I've got here with the hardy Geranium magnificum growing around it. But otherwise, it's certainly worth giving these stems a bit of support, especially as we move through into June and the flowers start opening. Those heads of flowers can be very heavy and the plants can lean over, especially in rainy weather. So very soon now I'll be giving this clump, which has grown out nicely. Now it's not an invasive campanula, but it will spread gently. So I've got stems coming up all around this area here now, alongside my bench. This is going to look glorious in about a month's time. Kent Belle does like a fertile but well-drained soil, and it grows really well in full sun, where the stems stay shorter and stockier, I find, although it will flower well in dappled shade too. In my garden, the main flower display is usually around June into July, but it can continue into August. Once each stem of flowers has faded, do try to deadhead promptly, doing this as a routine each week. Not only does this keep the displays looking neat and tidy, but cutting the flower stems right down to their base promotes new shoots to grow up from lower down on the plant through the rest of the summer, and these can carry a second, probably smaller flush of flowers later in the year. I've also read that tall campanulas can be suitable for pruning using the Chelsea chop technique, reducing the length of stems by about a half as we move through May before their main flowering display starts. This can promote strong, stocky growth from lower down on the plant, which will carry a slightly later but an upright display that possibly won't need so much support. I haven't tried this with my Kent Belle, but if any viewers have given their clumps the Chelsea chop, please add a comment below and let other viewers know how their plants performed. And campanulas have gained a reputation as a cottage garden flower, and a very useful one for growing around taller roses, where their green growth and beautiful violet blue flowers can fill in gaps and disguise those bare woody legs on established roses. It's always a pleasure sharing my hints, tips, ideas and advice with everyone. So please give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button right away and subscribe to my gardening channel. There's plenty more videos on my channel for you to enjoy too. Astrantia are a favourite summer flowering perennial in my main flower bed, where Astrantia aroma has come back again and again over many years to create a lovely display, starting around the end of May and continuing through June and July and well into August. And you can even leave these old flower heads in place if you want, as although their bright colour fades away to brown, you'll still have their bold structural form left to enjoy. But if that's not to your taste, just deadhead instead. Astrantia enjoy a sunny position, but will also grow really well in shade. Once established, they grow and spread into bigger clumps each year, but like many hardy perennials, their vigour and their flowering performance gradually diminishes over time, and you need to take them to task. So, about every 4 or 5 years, I rejuvenate the display by digging out big clumps in early spring, just as they're starting into growth, and split them up into smaller pieces, replanting these into freshly cultivated soil, forking over and mixing in plenty of compost. I garden on quite a heavy clay soil, but over the years I've dug in masses of compost, farmyard manure and other soil conditioners to help break it up, improve the organic content to feed the worms and microorganisms, and this raises up the soil surface too to help improve drainage. There are lots of varieties of Astrantia that might suit your garden, so check the catalogues to see which ones take your fancy. At a local garden near me called Elton Hall, I saw this pretty one, which I think is Astrantia Starburst. Here in mid-June, it produces dozens of white flower heads on branched stems about 20 inches tall, with green veining on the underside of the petals and a charming green tip to each one too. I'd recommend planting a small group of them together to create an impressive display, or perhaps even plant a few different coloured varieties together if there are several varieties you like. And in the centre of these delightful pink cushion flowers, you'll see pretty pink stalks holding the reproductive parts proud of the centre, displaying them for hungry bees to discover and feed from, which I can promise you they soon will. Just look at the bee almost having a feeding frenzy as it works its way systematically round the flower head. Its planting neighbour and complementing the display wonderfully is, I think, Astrantia Claret, which grows slightly taller and carries an equally generous and impressive display of dark burgundy red flower heads. They're a lovely, intense colour. And for anyone whose garden is regularly plagued by slugs, you'll be delighted to know that Astrantia are widely considered to be slug and snail resistant. They apparently have a natural defence to these pests, which could be something to do with the rough texture of their leaves or their taste or smell. Whatever it is, the experts agree. Astrantia is one rewarding hardy perennial that slugs and snails will hopefully ignore. For something hot and fiery in your borders, you can't beat Crocosmia Lucifer. Those arching flower stalks surge up through a cluster of sword-like bright green leaves, with flowers opening in succession from the base to the tip along the length of the stalk into brilliant scarlet red reflexed flowers with prominent wiry pollen-laden stamen poking out from each. These flowers are rich in pollen and nectar for bees and insects to feed from. Their buds are golden yellow at the base where they join the stalk and red at the tip, producing a vibrant two-toned display. And these develop in 2 rows of alternating buds sticking out on either side of the tall arching stalks. But it's when these burst open that these flowers really live up to their name. And while I'm talking about names, Crocosmia are often commonly called Montbretia. Lucifer can grow to about 4 foot or more in height once established, but it's a well-behaved hardy perennial that should remain a manageable clump over time. And with its arching habit, it's probably best planted behind some lower growing plants so their flower display grows up and over them. Now, Crocosmia does grow from a corm, like a gladioli or an acidanthera, but you'll usually find pots of it as growing plants, although dormant corms of Crocosmia can often be found for sale early in the year. Choose a warm, sunny site and a well-drained soil. These corms do not want to sit in cold, wet soil. Cut down the flower stalks once blooms fade, leaving the foliage to grow on and die down naturally through autumn before mulching over the top with a deep layer of compost or bark chips to provide some frost and cold protection through the winter months. There are many other varieties of Crocosmia available, and the bright orange George Davison is a match for many dahlias and other summer bedding plants, starting to flower a little earlier than Lucifer and growing slightly shorter too. Their flower spikes positively glow in the summer sun, beautifully complementing the flowers of Lucifer if you grow these two together as planting partners. And this is the main flower border that divides the top half from the bottom half of my garden. And what I try and do in this area is to plant it with as much colour as possible for as long a season as possible, starting in spring with the daffodils and tulips, and then as we come through to summer, a succession of lovely hardy perennials and flowering plants to keep the display going. The back of the border has got the wedding cake tree, lovely variety called Cornus controversa variegata, give me the height and the structure with its outstretched branches. I've got Black Beauty, an elder sambucus at the back there, coming into flower now. Remember, it flowers on its 2-year-old wood and older. And then with the backdrop of shrubs and taller plants, I've got a succession of flowers coming round to this wonderful display at the front. Geranium magnificum really is magnificent. It lives up to its name, doesn't it? This is a hardy geranium or a cranesbill, and I grow it in a big block through the front of my flower border. It gives you early summer colour. It's a generous variety, clump forming big clumps which will gradually spread over time. It has a really lovely lobed leaf. Let me come around here and go a little bit closer. See that beautiful lobe shape that you've got, petal fallen down there. Beautiful shaped green leaf, forms a lovely big bold clump and flowers with this wonderful display of beautifully veined leaves. The bees adore them too. This variety will be alive with bees through the summer when it's in flower. And it contrasts well with a number of things. The front of my border here, I've got a little sedum, but up through the Geranium magnificum, I've got some alliums, Christophii there, and a lovely bold giganteum variety, and as well as that, some Astrantia coming up through. This is Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, which I've had for many, many years, and also coming through another of my favourite plants, Astrantia. This one's Astrantia aroma. So Geranium magnificum puts on this tremendous display of flowers, grows to about 18 inches, 2 foot in height, spreads into nice clumps over the years, is fully hardy, creates a lovely, lovely display which the bees adore. So if you're trying to attract bees into your garden, this certainly is a bee-loving plant I'd recommend. And you will be treated with this lovely display of large blue flowers, each with that wonderful dark veining on it. Treat yourself to this plant, you really won't be disappointed. You really can find the Cranesbill for any situation around the garden. And here in this rose bed, surrounding these roses, I've put a fringe all the way around the bed of the bloody Cranesbill. This is Geranium sanguineum, which again in early summer has got these wonderful vibrant flowers which are developing. The bees love them too, and this spreads out into a thick clump. Another variety that you'll cut down to ground level in the winter, so I'll let it die down completely in the autumn, cut all of the old growth away. In the spring it will surge up to produce these new shoots with these wonderful vibrant little flowers, adding an enchanting display and setting off the roses in this bed beautifully. Growing to perhaps 3 to 4 foot in height, I've planted Physostegia bouquet rose towards the back of my main flower border. This hardy perennial quickly established, with clumps spreading out slowly each year to create ever bigger displays. It's not very deep rooted, so is easy to propagate simply by digging out a rooted portion from the edge of the clump. Spring's the best time when the shoots are quite short, but you could chop off chunks at any time if you're careful not to snap their stems. Physostegia dies down completely in winter, and it grows up through spring and early summer, starting to flower through July and continuing to carry flowers on its lower side shoots right through September. These flowers develop in 4 neat columns right round the flower head, one on each side of its square stem, starting to open from the bottom and slowly opening towards the tip over several weeks. They also make good cut flowers. And once the first flowers at the tip of each shoot fade, just snip these off, and these side shoots growing out further down each stem will extend upwards and take over to carry a succession of flowers right through summer and into autumn. I don't usually provide clumps with any support at all, but during very hot, damp summers, they can grow taller and be prone to leaning over as the weight of their flower heads opens. So, if neighbouring plants aren't holding your clumps upright, you might need to knock some canes in around each clump and link them together with string for support. These soft pink tubular flowers, rather like miniature snapdragons, are loved by bees, and its common name of the obedient plant comes from the fact that when you push individual flowers sideways out of their neat columns, well, they'll obediently stay in place without bending back. I'm not sure why you'd want to do this, but that's how the obedient plant got its name. Alstroemeria are one of my favourite garden plants, and for very good reason. If you want a long season of colour, if you want plants that flower week after week and month after month, then look no further than Alstroemeria, or as they're sometimes called, Peruvian lilies. Whether in borders or patio pots, there are varieties in sizes and heights to suit any garden. And here where I live, they start flowering around about the end of May or early June, right through to the end of the year, giving you a succession of flower colour month after month. These are hardy perennials that come back every year, and in my opinion, you won't find a group of plants that flower so generously and over such a long period. Alstroemeria are fleshy or tuberous rooted perennials, and if you're familiar with the dahlia tuber with its central growing point surrounded by thick fleshy tuberous growth, then an Alstroemeria is similar but more delicate, forming a cluster of thin tubers. But while you buy dormant dahlia tubers in spring to plant in pots or in the garden, you'll usually buy Alstroemeria as young growing plants and not bare-rooted tubers. I love growing the dwarf and compact varieties in pots and containers. A nice large size container is perfect, where they'll quickly fill out the pot with flowers. And if you deadhead promptly by pulling or firmly plucking out the old flower heads, new stems will soon push up from through the compost from below to fill the space and carry further flushes of gorgeous blooms. I just bring my pots of Alstroemeria under cover into my unheated greenhouse for the winter, really to keep the cold and wet off them. Where their top growth will die down, you can clear that away, start watering the pots in spring, and they'll soon send up new shoots. And then I can bring them back outside onto my patio, probably in around early June, to enjoy their first flowers. But Alstroemerias can also be planted out in your flower borders. This is one hardy perennial that won't disappoint. And with so many different colours of Alstroemeria to choose from, I'm sure you'll find at least one to fall in love with. If you're looking for a nice upright hardy perennial that produces spires of blooms up to about 3 foot in height through summer, then perhaps the prairie mallow could be a good choice if you have an open sunny site. The large soft pink flowers of Sidalcea lc. are well over an inch across, opening into a wide cup, and each with a rather jagged, frilly edge. Each bloom has a series of overlapping petals that almost look like the texture of satin, making this a good choice for a mixed border and fitting in well to cottage garden style of planting. It's a bit like a pretty pink hollyhock, but without the problems of rust infecting and discolouring the leaves. It has strong vertical flower spikes that open over several weeks through June, July and into August, starting at the bottom of the spikes and then opening in succession towards the tip. Bees and beneficial insects adore feeding from them too. This is quite a stocky plant, so it shouldn't need any support. Once the flowers fade, cut the stems down hard, perhaps to ground level, and this encourages new growth from the base that can carry another flush of flowers later in the autumn. A light, fertile and free-draining soil is ideal, nothing heavy, wet or waterlogged, although it doesn't tolerate drought, so you could need to do some watering during very dry summer weather. Plants die back in winter, so clear away the old growth, cutting it away at soil level, spread a mulch of compost around the plants and new shoots start developing in spring. Large established clumps can be divided into smaller pieces in spring and replanted, and this helps maintain the vigour and flowering performance of this lovely hardy perennial. No summer border would be complete without Salvia Amistad, one of the longest flowering hardy perennials you'll find anywhere, so I guarantee you won't be disappointed. These impressive flower spikes grow ever taller as we move through the summer months, creating a colourful display of deep purple flowers. It's a showy plant, attracting bees and butterflies in to feed, and if you rub your fingers over the leaves, you'll release their aromatic fragrance as a reminder that one of its common names is the friendship sage. with Salvia being a member of the sage family, and Amistad meaning friendship in Spanish. I've planted my Salvia Amistad in a sunny flower border and a well-drained soil alongside the path running down the side of my lawn. I didn't give it any support, I just let the stems grow up to enjoy this wonderful flowering display. Now this salvia isn't fully hardy, so it does need some winter protection in colder areas, and I need winter protection where I live too, especially where it's been planted in an open or an exposed site. So after I cut down the stems in late autumn, I mound a deep layer of mulch over the base to cover the roots, and then I cover it with a cloche to make sure frost doesn't penetrate down and kill the roots. Remove the cloche once conditions warm up during spring, as new shoots will grow up from the base. By June they'll be a couple of feet or more in height and forming their first flowers, and flowering will continue right through summer and into autumn, when mature plants could reach about 4 foot or so in height. Flowering will start at the tip of each main shoot, and once these flowers fade, cut them off, and side shoots developing further down the stems will grow out and carry displays of flowers week after week. What more could you ask for? It is not just the leaves that make Ascot Rainbow such a valuable hardy perennial. It's the flowers too. When I first planted this plant in my autumn-winter pot arrangement, it was just a lovely crown of foliage. It contrasted well with its neighbouring plants and added that lovely zing to my winter display. It looked lovely through January and February, and as we moved through winter into March, the flowering spikes had started to develop, and they gradually move up and curl open. They look gorgeous as they're developing, and by spring they're in full flower. And now I'm in the middle of June and I've already got a beautiful crown of flowers here. There are literally thousands of flowers on this plant. They've got a little bract at their base which has got gold and green markings on it, and then the individual little flowers themselves are almost deep reddish colour. Look absolutely gorgeous, and this display will last week after week after week. I'm going to leave it in place here, enjoy this as we move through summer. But down at the base, now we can see down here, I've got the leaf stem from last year and coming out, but right the way down at the bottom of these stems I can just see some new little buds developing. So as we move through summer, what I'm going to be doing is looking at the base of the stems, watching the growth right down at the bottom, and once it is perhaps an inch or so high, I'm going to cut off all of this top growth completely, remove this and make room for the new growth to come up, and those new shoots will grow up through autumn, and as we move through to winter I'll again have a nice crown of foliage to enjoy in my display. If you've got this plant in your border, do the same thing. Enjoy the flowers through the summer, and once you think you've got some nice shoots developing down at the base of each of these stems, cut them back down to just above that new growth, remove the old flowers and make room for the new leaves shoots to develop up. I love getting plants for free, but one plant which has just turned up in one of my borders is this lovely bell flower. I think it's called the peach-leafed bell flower. This is Campanula persicifolia. Isn't it gorgeous? Produces these tall spikes of bell flowers, which has grown up to about 3 or 4 foot now. Needed a little bit of support just to hold it upright, but they will self-seed around. So once this has finished flowering, I'm going to leave this not deadheaded, because hopefully it will form some more seed, and those seeds will self-seed in my borders, and then in future years I can enjoy some lovely displays like this as we move through summer. Absolutely free. I didn't have to do a thing, and I've got some extra flowers in my borders. Isn't it lovely? And alongside the alliums, I've got some Alstroemeria. This is a variety called Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. I've had this for many years in the border. It's just spread naturally in amongst the other plants, weaving its way across the border and sending up the flower spikes at intervals to layer on some extra height and colour to the flowering display. That's the lovely thing about Alstroemerias. They'll weave their way through your borders and add just that touch of extra colour. And if I want, I could pull these stems, just give them a little bit of a tug at the bottom and pull them as cut flowers to bring indoors and enjoy in the house. If it's June, then it's Lupin time. These hardy perennials are gorgeous when in full flower, like these pure white and majestic lupins growing in a garden near me called Elton Hall. This drift of them looks really impressive when they're at their best, and there's something quite striking about such a bold display of pure white flowers set off against the bushy mounds of green foliage below. Their beautiful spikes can start opening in late May, but I always think of lupins as a reliable June flowering perennial. Now, lupins come in a wide range of colours, usually good, strong colours like Masterpiece with its tall, chunky purple spikes. And these can help you develop lovely, bold, colour-themed areas around your garden that really do provide that impressive focal point when in full bloom. For something equally striking, there's Beefeater with gorgeous red spires flecked with yellow, impressive and broad at the base, but tapering towards the tip, with individual flowers opening from the base to the head upwards as they mature. They grow straight and vertical, upright and regimented, but you could hardly call them formal. And their leaves are a lovely bright green colour, palm-shaped, spreading wide like fingers from your hand. In my own garden, I used to have this clump of lupins called the chatelaine, carrying alternate pink and white pea-shaped flowers up their spikes. And these contrasted nicely with the dark foliage foil behind of the purple-leaved elder. Now, I have an admission to make. I have to admit I'm not sure that lupins really give enough value for the space they take up. Don't get me wrong, bold established clumps can look spectacular when their flower spikes are fully formed, but once they're faded, that's it. They only have a short flowering season, and I'm not fully convinced they earn their space. But then again, you could say that about a host of other plants too, like peonies or perhaps rhododendrons and camellias that have a reasonably short flowering season. Having said that, I'm happy to give these garden space. It's often recommended to deadhead them promptly after flowering, shortening that main flower stem back to its base, as this can promote a second flush of possibly smaller flowers later in the year. However, I've done this and I've never been successful in getting a second flush of flower, and all you're left with after flowering is a gap, a hole in your border. So if you do grow lupins, I think it's important to plant them reasonably far back in the border so other plants can grow up in front of them as we move through summer and hide that gap. What do you think? Have you got lupins in your garden, and would you recommend them to other gardeners? Do add your thoughts in the comments below. So there you have it, some beautiful plants in that mixture, I hope you'll agree. And I hope you found something that you'd like to go out and buy and plant in your own garden. Thank you so much indeed for joining me today. I've got dozens of videos on my YouTube channel at Adam's Gardening Guide, so do check those out. If this interest caught your eye, you'll find lots more full of ideas of plants to choose, different varieties, hardy plants, shrubs, patio gardening, growing bulbs like lilies in pots, and much, much more. Thanks for joining me, and whatever you're up to, enjoy your garden.